10 years ago, my son vanished. A cargo ship explosion in the Atlantic, they said. No body, no trace, just an empty ocean and an even emptier house. Everyone eventually accepted he was gone, but I never truly did. Then, at 4:07 a.m., my phone rang. A trembling voice whispered, "Dad, I'm at Harbor Gate 7. Please come get me." 30 minutes later, a man stepped out of the pre-dawn gloom, a face identical to my son's. Those same eyes, that same scar, that same voice. I pulled him into a hug, my heart threatening to burst. But in that very moment, I knew. Something was terribly, terribly wrong. This is a story about family, betrayal, and the long, arduous road to rebuilding trust. The call came from a dead man. I knew the exact time because I'd been awake since 3:30, as I had been for most of the past decade, staring out at Galveston Bay from the hollow, 12-room mansion I called home. At 68, I'd built Harrington Maritime Holdings from a single vessel into a $200 million empire. Yet, every morning, I woke to the void Soren left when his boat went down. The display read, Harbor Gate 7, Galveston Port Authority. I picked up on the second ring. "Father," the voice said, trembling, exhausted, unmistakably young. "Father, I'm at Harbor Gate 7. Please help me." My hand tightened on the phone. The cadence was right. The slight rasp at the end of sentences. The way words tumbled forward as if afraid of silence. But Soren had never called me father. Not once in 28 years. Always dad. Sometimes the old man when joking, but never father. 10 years. And now this voice cut through the Gulf Coast night. "Stay there," I said, my voice steady despite the tremor in my soul. "I'm coming." I was in my Lincoln within 4 minutes, driving through empty Galveston streets toward the industrial port, where cargo ships lined up like sleeping giants under sodium lights. The Gulf wind carried salt and diesel through my open window. My hands on the wheel were perfectly steady. That's how I knew I wasn't the desperate old man someone thought I was. 40 years in maritime shipping teaches you to read people. Which handshakes mean a deal, and which ones mean a lawsuit. Which smiles are genuine, and which ones cover the knife sliding between your ribs. And this, when a miracle appears at 4:07 in the morning, someone's running a con. The question wasn't whether the voice belonged to my son. The question was, who needed me broken enough to weaponize Soren's face, and what they planned to take once I was. I turned onto Harbor Road. The Port Authority gate loomed ahead, chain link and floodlights cutting geometric shadows across cracked asphalt. A figure stood beneath the yellow glow, gaunt shoulders hunched in a worn sailor's coat that looked like it had crossed oceans. I pulled to the curb and killed the engine. The man turned. Green eyes, square jaw, the slight hook in his nose where Soren broke it playing high school baseball. Even his posture, weight on his left foot, right hand gripping his opposite elbow, matched the stance I'd memorized from a decade of photographs. I stepped out. The Gulf wind pulled at my shirt. He took 3 steps forward, his face fully visible under the lights. If this was a copy, it was a masterwork. Cheekbones exact, hairline precise. Even the small scar above his left eyebrow, where Soren needed 4 stitches at age 9. "Hey, Dad," he said, his voice breaking. "It's really me. I'm home." I opened my arms. He fell into them, and I knew. Soren had a ritual from age 7 that never stopped. Every hug, goodbye at airports, good morning in the kitchen, consolation after his mother's funeral, ended the same way. 3 pats on my back. Quick, rhythmic, 1, 2, 3. Every single time for 21 years. Right up until the morning he boarded the vessel that took him into the Atlantic. This man held me still, arms wrapped tight, breathing ragged against my shoulder, body trembling with what I was supposed to believe was relief and exhaustion, and the weight of 10 impossible years. But no 3 pats. Not 2, not 4. Not the unconscious rhythm that had been Soren's signature since childhood. Just stillness where truth should have been. I held the embrace 5 seconds longer than necessary. Let him think I was overcome. Let him believe the grief-stricken father was too destroyed by hope to think clearly. I pulled back, gripped his shoulders, and looked into those perfect green eyes someone had paid a surgeon to craft. "Let me take you home, son," I said. my voice carrying exactly the right tremor. "You must be exhausted. I can't believe you're finally back." He wiped at his eyes. Real tears, or a good performance. I thought about this moment every single day. "So did I said. Truth and lie woven together. I led him to the Lincoln. He slid into the passenger seat. Soren's seat, empty for a decade. And I started the engine. The dashboard clock read 4:43, 36 minutes since the phone call. 36 minutes since someone tried to change everything. Because here's what they didn't understand. I'd spent 10 years building walls around the wound Soren left. I'd spent 10 years learning to function with half my heart gone. I'd become someone who could sit across from an imposter wearing my son's face and feel nothing but cold, strategic clarity. Whoever sent this man thought they were exploiting my grief. What they'd actually done was hand me a thread, and I was very good at pulling threads until entire operations unraveled. I drove through the pre-dawn darkness, listening to him manufacture stories about amnesia and fishing boats, and slowly recovering memories. His performance was flawless. Someone had trained him well, taught him Soren's vocal patterns, his mannerisms, probably fed him 100 family details to deploy at strategic moments. But they'd missed the 3 pats, that tiny private ritual existing nowhere in photographs or documents, the kind of detail only a real father and real son would know. And now I knew 3 things with absolute certainty. First, this man wasn't Soren. Second, whoever built this deception had access to deep information about my family. Third, they'd made the fatal mistake of thinking a grieving father was the same thing as a stupid one. I pulled into the mansion driveway as the eastern sky started to gray. At Harbor Gate, Soren, under those sodium lights, Thane Prescott, 37 and gaunt beneath his worn coat, had stood trembling with a surgically altered face that was a nearly perfect replica of my missing son. The imposter stared at the house like he was coming home. I stared at him, calculating exactly how long I'd let this play out before I dismantled everyone involved. "Welcome back, son," I said. And I meant it, because he just walked into the trap he thought he was setting. I showed the imposter to Soren's old bedroom at 5 in the morning, then went downstairs and started cooking my dead son's favorite breakfast for a stranger wearing his face. The smell of chorizo and eggs felt like a betrayal of memory itself. Dawn light filtered through the kitchen windows overlooking Galveston Bay. I had bought the chorizo from Powell's Market, the same spicy blend Soren could smell from his bedroom and be downstairs in 30 seconds. Sunday tradition for 18 years. Scrambled eggs with chorizo, Texas sourdough toast, and exactly 3 shakes of Cholula hot sauce. My daughter Bettina arrived at 9 a.m., her usual Sunday visit. She saw the imposter, Thane, at the breakfast table, and her reaction was a masterpiece of feigned shock and overwhelming joy. She embraced him, tears streaming, whispering how much she'd missed him. It was a performance worthy of an Oscar, and it confirmed my suspicions. Bettina was in on it. My own daughter, orchestrating this cruel charade. The pieces clicked into place. Bettina had always felt overshadowed by Soren, always craved my attention. This was her way of gaining control, of seizing the empire she believed was rightfully hers. The next few weeks were a delicate dance. Thane, the imposter, played his part flawlessly, weaving tales of his miraculous survival and slow recovery of memory. Bettina was constantly by his side, reinforcing his stories, subtly pushing for his reintegration into the family business. They even brought in Lyle, my longtime corporate attorney, to discuss revising the estate plan to include Soren. Lyle, a man I'd trusted for decades, now complicit in their scheme. He presented 42 pages of legal documents, framed as a simple update, but I knew better. These weren't estate planning documents, they were a masterpiece of legal theft. Page 28 was particularly important, establishing a timeline for distribution activation. Upon execution, the amendments would take immediate effect, and within 90 days, all voting share transfers would complete automatically. A standard processing window, Lyle said smoothly. Set compliance requirements, shareholder notification periods, all by the book. Bettina leaned forward. "We want everything proper, Dad. No shortcuts, just family taking care of family." Lyle produced an expensive Mont Blanc fountain pen and placed it beside 3 signature pages. "If you're comfortable," he said, We can execute today. I've arranged for mobile notarization this afternoon. 42 pages, distilled to 3 signature blocks. Simple, clean, irreversible. Bettina's eyes never left my face, watching for hesitation, for doubt, for any sign I suspected what they'd built. I set down the documents and met her gaze. This is my life's work on these pages. 40 years of building Harrington Maritime. I need time to review every clause personally. Of course, Dad, Bettina said immediately. No push, no pressure, perfect patience. Take whatever time you need. We just want everything proper for Soren. A week, I said. Let me read through everything. Consult with my own counsel. Make sure I understand all implications. Absolutely, Lyle said, gathering the documents back into the portfolio. This is too important to rush. We'll follow up early next week. They stood. Professional handshakes, reassuring smiles. Bettina kissed my cheek on her way out, something she hadn't done in months. I walked them to the front door, watched their Mercedes pull down the oak-lined driveway, waited until their taillights disappeared around the curve. Then I returned to my study and stood at the window for 5 full minutes, staring at nothing. Standing at that window, watching their car disappear, I felt something I hadn't experienced in 40 years of corporate warfare. The calm certainty that comes from knowing you're not reacting to your opponent's move. You predicted it 2 months ago and already built the countertrap. 42 pages. Lyle had spent months drafting this. Every clause designed to transfer control the moment I signed. If I hadn't known the truth, this would have worked perfectly. But I'd known for 3 weeks, which meant I'd had 3 weeks to prepare. I picked up my encrypted phone and dialed Elmer Delaney's direct line. He answered on the first ring. Elmer, I said, they just presented the estate amendment exactly as we anticipated. It's 40-some pages of legal work. Elmer's voice carried grim satisfaction. Lyle's specialty. 42 pages, I confirmed. Masterful architecture. If I'd signed it, they'd control everything within 90 days. How long before they push for signature? Days? Maybe a week. But I've arranged everything. I need you present on December 15th. Full board assembly, annual shareholders meeting. In the irrevocable trust, Elmer said. I executed October 1st. I confirmed. 2 weeks before Thane ever appeared, your sole trustee, 51% controlling shares, untouchable by family members. And December 15th is when we reveal it. Along with DNA evidence, Thane's recorded confessions, Russell's forensic documentation, and one more piece Bettina doesn't know about. What's that? My real son walking through the boardroom doors while the imposter sits next to my daughter. Elmer went quiet for 3 seconds. You found Soren. Russell tracked him to Nassau. We're bringing him home. He arrives December 14th. Jesus, Lester. December 15th isn't just the annual meeting, Elmer. It's the day everything collapses. The trap I set 2 months ago finally springs. I hung up and looked at Lyle's 42 pages spread across my desk. The weapon they thought would destroy me, now destined to become evidence in their own prosecution. Bettina and Lyle thought they were racing toward a finish line. They had no idea I'd moved it 3 months ago. December 15th was set. The trap was armed. Elmer would reveal the trust. DNA evidence would expose Thane. Russell's recordings would document the conspiracy. And my real son would walk through boardroom doors, while the imposter sat next to my daughter. But first I needed to confirm the foundation was solid. On October 27th, I drove to Houston to review the legal document I'd executed on October 1st, 2 weeks before the phone call that would change everything. Proof that I'd seen this conspiracy coming long before my daughter knew I was watching. I kept the appointment secret, didn't tell Bettina, didn't log it in my calendar, paid the consultation fee in cash. 60 miles from Galveston to downtown Houston, giving me time to think about timing, about how small details accumulate into patterns, about how Zelda had mentioned in late September that Bettina was printing estate balance sheets at 11 p.m. in locked offices. That had been enough. One late-night printing session, one deviation from normal behavior, enough to make me act. Thornton and Associates occupied the 42nd floor of a glass tower overlooking Houston's financial district. Elite estate planning firm. the kind of practice that handled billion-dollar trusts and never advertised because their clients came through referrals whispered in country club dining rooms. The receptionist recognized me immediately. "Mr. Harrington," she said. "Mr. Caldwell is expecting you. Conference Room 3. Attorney Raymond Caldwell." The boardroom on December 15th was a tableau of tension. Bettina sat beside Thane, a picture of familial unity. Lyle was there, radiating quiet confidence. The entire board, shareholders, and key executives were present. Elmer Delaney, my trusted attorney, sat opposite them, a faint smile playing on his lips. I stood at the head of the table, the air thick with anticipation. "We have some important matters to discuss today," I began, my voice calm and steady. "Beginning with the recent amendments to my estate plan." Lyle cleared his throat, ready to present his carefully crafted deception. But before he could speak, Elmer interjected. "With all due respect, Mr. Harrington, I believe there's a more pressing matter to address first." He then proceeded to lay bare the irrevocable trust I had established, transferring 51% of Harrington Maritime's controlling shares to him as sole trustee. The room erupted. Bettina's face went from confident to ashen. Lyle looked like he'd seen a ghost. Then, the DNA evidence. Russell, my head of security, presented the irrefutable proof that Thane was not Soren. The imposter, stripped of his carefully constructed facade, crumbled. He confessed, detailing Bettina and Lyle's elaborate scheme, all captured on Russell's hidden recordings. The betrayal was laid bare for all to see. Just as the chaos reached its peak, the boardroom doors opened, and there he was, Soren, my real son, alive, scarred but undeniably him. The room fell silent, a collective gasp. Bettina stared, her world collapsing around her. Thane, the imposter, sat frozen, his deception utterly shattered. Soren, my son, walked towards me, his eyes meeting mine. He had been found in Nassau, a survivor of the explosion, suffering from amnesia and severe burns, slowly piecing his life back together. The aftermath was brutal. Bettina and Lyle faced legal consequences for their conspiracy. Thane, the imposter, received a reduced sentence for his cooperation. The empire I had built was safe, but the family was broken. Soren, my real son, bore the physical scars of the explosion and the emotional wounds of a decade lost. Yet, he chose forgiveness. He understood Bettina's desperation, her lifelong yearning for my attention, which I had so carelessly withheld. His grace, in the face of such betrayal, was a profound lesson for me. New Year's Eve, 7 years later, Soren and I sat on the veranda, watching fireworks explode across Galveston Bay like distant thunder. Anchor, the old retriever who'd spent a decade waiting on this veranda beside me during the missing years, finally had both Harringtons present to rest between. He lay with his gray muzzle on Soren's knee, his tail wagging exactly 3 times against the wooden deck, the same rhythm as the year I'd rebuilt. One wag for the son who came home, one for the daughter who might, one for learning the difference between building empires and building families. "Are you all right, Dad?" Soren asked, watching me watch the fireworks. I was quiet for a long moment, considering the question honestly. "Not sure all right matches the ledger, son," I said finally. "Lost a decade, nearly lost a daughter, built an empire but forgot to build a family. Your mother died begging me to keep searching, and I failed that promise for years." Another firework exploded, gold cascading into silver. "But I think I'm finally learning how to live, instead of just remaining alive," I said. "And you're here. That counts for something." Soren reached over and gripped my shoulder once, then released. We sat in silence, watching the bay light up with celebration, while Anchor's tail thumped 3 more times against the deck. After midnight, I went to my study and pulled out Harrington Maritime letterhead, wrote a single line in the careful script Francis had always said made my handwriting look like a maritime contract, sealed it in an envelope, addressed to Bettina at the correctional facility. Zelda Blanchard, 54 and handling Harrington household correspondence for 15 years, knew which letters required priority processing and which required discretion. This one required both. I found her in the kitchen preparing New Year's breakfast. "This needs to reach the correctional facility by January 2nd, I said, handing her the envelope. Can you ensure priority processing? I'll handle it personally, Mr. Harrington, Zelda said, taking the envelope with the practiced care of someone who understood some letters carried more weight than others. She'll have it by Wednesday morning. I watched Zelda leave with the envelope, thinking about circular structures. The story started with the wrong son calling me father at 4:07 a.m. on October 15th over a phone line crackling with deception. It was ending with the right daughter reading 4 words I'd written in ink on December 31st. Father will be here. Voice to paper, false son to true daughter. Both messages beginning with the same word, addressing the same man who'd spent 42 years building wealth and forgetting family. 7 years from now, Bettina would walk out of custody to find her father, 68, turned 75. Her brother, 38, turned 45. And a foundation bearing her mother's name that had turned tragedy into help for maritime families who still had time to come home. The question wasn't whether I'd be here, it was whether she'd forgive me for taking 42 years to learn how to be a father instead of just an empire builder. But I'd be waiting to find out. And to you listening to my story, remember this. Revenge might feel justified, but mercy is what rebuilds what was broken. Don't make the mistake I made for 42 years. I built a $200 million empire while my daughter felt invisible. I was so focused on success that I didn't see her desperation until she'd orchestrated a conspiracy that nearly destroyed us all. If I'd looked at her, really looked, maybe family betrayal wouldn't have become her only path to my attention. Family betrayal cuts deeper than any business deal gone wrong. But here's what I learned. Forgiveness isn't weakness, it's strength. When my real son came home with burn scars and chose to forgive his sister instead of condemning her, he taught me more about grace than I'd learned in 6 decades. I believe God put me through this to show me that empire means nothing if you're alone at the top. The lesson isn't about punishing those who hurt you, it's about choosing family, even when they've broken your trust. Now, I want to hear from you. What would you have done in my position? Would you have forgiven the daughter who orchestrated the family betrayal, or walked away? Leave a comment below. Your perspective matters. If this story moved you, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. And subscribe to Revenge Dad for more stories about choosing what's right over what feels justified. Thank you for staying until the very end. Your time means everything to me. One final note. While the core message is real, some details have been fictionalized for storytelling and impact. What matters is the lesson about family forgiveness and the courage it takes to rebuild broken trust.